Hi guys, Corey from Aquariumcoop here, and today is how to breed fish for profit, number 5, kind of some Q&A. I'm getting a lot of questions, answering a lot of questions in the comments, and some of them make for good topics. And so the first one I would say is, people keep saying, well, my fish store just won't buy fish from me. Now, we've established there's a difference between a corporate chain and a local fish store. If we're talking about a corporate chain, they are bound by contracts and they literally cannot do it. So you're going to be out of luck there. But if it's a local store, which a lot of you said, I do have a local store and they won't buy from me. There's, all the things we've said thus far in this series. So I'm going to take into account you've watched parts 1 through 4. Otherwise, you're going to miss crucial steps and all this extra information is not going to help you. But yeah, so realize fish stores are dirt poor. They're broke. Every business almost is. People don't realize that when they're working with a business or buying from a business or a store or whatever, they are so cash poor. In the business industry, it's not uncommon to have lines of credit with almost every vendor where you don't pay them for 90 days. And so this can be very dangerous in the fish world, obviously, because if you buy $1,000 worth of fish and you kill them, 3 months later you still have to pay for them. And so a lot of stores kind of get into trouble and things like that where they will buy fish, eventually they have a bad shipment or they die, something happens, now they owe money and now they're cash poor so that they're always kind of in debt to the vendors. So how does this apply to you? You as the breeder at this point? Well, if we know that your target client, which is a local fish store, doesn't have money, how are we going to sell to them for money? People go, well, they'll only give credit. They won't give cash. It might be because they can't give cash. It's not that they don't want to, but they literally might not be able to. And so the easiest thing you can do is accept credit cards. Go ahead and get yourself a Square reader or a PayPal reader or Intuit. Any of the free ones are completely free. Like Square, you just sign up, they'll send you one, or you can stop by like a Rite Aid or a CVS and buy one. They'll reimburse you the $10 that it costs to buy one. But now you've got a cell phone, you've got a card reader, and you can walk in, you can go, oh yes, I'm selling this fish, here's my price list, here's all my business contacts, by the way, I accept cash, check, credit card. All of a sudden you seem like legitimate business instead of like, well, I'm just taking cash, things like that. And on the flip side, when you take credit card payments, it also is going to keep track of everything for you. So now you can know, oh, how much exactly did I make? How much should I be reporting as income? Things like that. Lots of useful tools. You can also look up past orders, things like that. You can generate invoices with PayPal where you could email them the invoice 3 days before you get there. They can look it over, make sure that's what they want. When you show up, you just swipe the card and pay for it, and they've got their list that's printed. All looks way more legitimate and like you know what you're doing, even though you might not. And it satisfies the thing of, well, all the cash I had to pay rent, and so I can only charge when I buy fish. And so now you can allow them to charge it, and it doesn't, a lot of people, even business people, when they charge it, they don't think that it costs them as much money. They go, well, I'll sell them and I'll pay it off later, no problem at all, but that's not true. And in fact, I run my business where we pay cash for everything. So everything in the store, everything you ever see on video, it's all outright paid for. That being said, there is smart things to do. Like we buy everything with a credit card and pay it off as soon as it hits the invoice. So every week we pay the balance of the credit card off, and because we build rewards points and all these things, but it's much better, or at least I sleep better at night knowing I own all this no matter what happens. If there's 10 zebra plecos sitting there and they all die, I don't owe someone money for that. I've already paid for it. I've already calculated the risk, all that. But most stores don't do that, and so being able to take credit cards will further you quite a bit in building that relationship. It brings you to another level of, oh, he takes credit cards, he's ready to do business, that type of thing. The other thing I can think of as a good tip let's say you finally do get your foot in the door here. This is, someone asking me how they can make it go smoother, or the fish aren't doing well at the store, that type of thing, or my store just kills my fish, what do I do? Make it so they can't fail. So what that means is, let's say you have your fish at your house and they're at 80 degrees, growing well, they've only ever eaten one type of food, and instantly they're going to go to a fish store the next day where they might be sitting at 75 degrees because they're heating the whole room and they're a little bit colder than normal, so they're already uncomfortable. They're going to be presented with foods they've probably never seen before, because most fish stores tend to feed a very economical fish food as opposed to a very high quality fish food. So things you can do, like if you watch, by now you can watch a video linked here to like Dean's Fish Room. He breeds lots of discus and rams and things like that. He breeds them and maintains them at a certain temperature, but then he actually has to drop the temperature down to 77, 78 so that stores will do well with them, because most stores aren't going to keep them hot enough and the fish won't do as well for him in that environment. So look for a link for that video here if you want to watch that guy and how his operation is. In a very small room, produces an insane amount of fish. So what you want to do, the same thing I was saying Dean does, is when you know you're going to be selling fish, spend a couple of weeks and get them down to the temperature the store's going to keep them at, and similar water change schedule. If your fish are used to getting a water change, like in Dean's case, twice a week, and your fish store is only doing it once a week or once every 2 weeks, you don't want the fish to fall apart on them. So get them conditioned to that, so that if they were going to fall apart, they fall apart in your care and you can fix it, and they'll be used to that routine. And then also, when you deliver your fish, think about delivering some fish food as well. Go, well, these guys really love to eat this. I want to make sure they do well for you, so here's some food to get them by for at least a couple weeks. And I'd appreciate if you just fed these guys, because they're not going to take that well to this cruddy flake over here you're feeding or whatever. Don't say it that way. Just say like, well, I know they do really well on this, and I want to see them do well for you. It's even a better thing if you can give them a little bit of fish food and it's something they already sell and that you buy from them. So like, oh yeah, here's a little bit of pellets for them. I just want to make sure they eat that. I buy it from you. And that way they know, like, oh, I could pull some food off the shelf and I could feed that to those fish and they'll do well. This is what they're used to eating. They're used to this temperature, all those things. That'll help make sure that the store isn't killing your fish, because that, no matter how good of a breeder you are, and you can make fish and you can do everything, if they have a store employee who's just letting them die, then that's going to reflect badly on you. So even if it's the brand new guy or girl straight out of high school is in charge of taking care of your section of tanks where your fish tend to live and get sold out of, and they're really bad, they're just using cold water and they're not feeding very well and they're just doing all these things wrong, that's going to reflect on, oh, your fish don't live. So everything you can do to boost that image of your own fish is going to really build that reputation. So the other question I've gotten asked a bunch is, how long have I been doing this? In my opinion, I haven't been doing it that long compared to people like, let's say, Dean in that video, where he's been breeding fish professionally or at a very high level for 40 years. I've only been breeding fish for, seriously, I would say, between 10 and 12 years. And, I'm new to the hobby. I've never said that I've been around my whole life. I didn't get into it till, probably 12, 13 years ago, but I do jump into things head first and tend to get way too into it, and it becomes my new obsession. And so I went from my first fish tank, which was a 65-gallon aquarium, to lots of aquariums and breeding fish in well under a year, to less than a year after that I was working for a fish store, working for them for 5 years, and then it was opening my own store and things like that. And so that's how I know a bit about it. I've done a lot of it. I've bred a lot of fish. I ran the Greater Seattle Aquarium Society's breeding program, so I worked with lots of breeders. I keep in contact with lots of breeders now. I've consumed every piece of information I can get my hands on when it comes to breeding a fish I'm interested in, or just breeding fish for profit, or things like that. I basically go into YouTube or lectures or something like that, that no matter who is talking, I can learn something from them. It could be a 5-year-old kid talking about how he spawns swordtails, and you're going, well, there's no way this kid's going to teach you anything, but you can always learn something. You might learn that, wow, in the case of that kid's case, let's say he was able to breed and raise swordtails in a 5-gallon tank with water changes once a month. You were learning the threshold of tolerance for that swordtail when you might have been giving it much better care, but now you know a threshold of, wow, it can take kind of a lot of abuse. And so there's always something to learn, and you should always be looking for what it is you can learn when you're reading an article, watching a YouTube video, attending a lecture, everything. You should be able to extract a few points out of everything you watch and go, what were the things that were big elements out of that I should really dwell on and think about, and think about that kind of stuff when you're driving in the car. Let's say you're making that fish delivery, really hone in on what were they talking about, why is that so important, and why haven't I seen other people do it, and things like that. I'm always interested to see what other people are doing that I'm not doing, and for instance, someone said, well, I bred a bunch of fish and I use Ken's fish food, and you don't like Ken's fish food, why not? And that's the perfect reason you want to be using it, is, well, why are they not using it, why am I using it? And trying to decipher why or why not. Once you're thinking about it, overall you'll come out with a better outcome for your fish room, your fish plan, things like that. A lot of stores buy from Ken's Fish to feed their own fish and stuff like that. I personally just don't use much of Ken's fish food. And when I'm talking about Ken's fish food, I mean the stuff that he's branded himself, not like, let's say, Hikari foods that he also sells. Like sometimes I'll use some of that, but typically I can't use Hikari foods much in the store because they have such a strong smell that when I feed 100 aquariums, the store smells odd, and I don't enjoy that. So especially things like Massivore, which I love as a food, but the krill with the sponge filters and the heated water, it really smells fishy every day that I feed it. So I typically don't feed it very often. And but for his own foods, part of the problem is I find the consistency to vary wildly. And so one batch of flake might be super crunchy, the next one's not as crunchy. One time it comes out of the the hopper into the bag and it got 50% green flake, and then a few other types of flake, and then one time it was a great mix, and then one time it showed up and it had been crushed into 1 billion pieces. And then there's different pellet foods where it's a floating food, but half of it's actually sinking. And then there's things like some of the premium foods, so to speak, which have blood meal and feather meal and things like that, which are basically just been proven that fish can't digest them, or can't utilize them, and so it's just extra filler in going into the aquariums, causing waste and things like that. That being said, there are some products I do like. I do like golden pearls, which he's labeling as himself, but obviously he doesn't have them made. They're actually made for labs and things like that, and you can buy them from other sources. That being said, it's a very high quality food because it has to be for the labs that are paying that kind of money. It's also one of his most expensive foods. I find Ken's Fish focuses on price as opposed to quality on most of the things, and I myself focus on quality as opposed to price. So I just find in general I get a lot more bang for my buck when I focus on the quality of the food as opposed to how much the food costs me. And usually, while yes, you can go, well, I get 2 pounds of this food for $5, and this one I get 1 pound for $5, most times when you're looking at what the fish can actually use, it's probably very close. So it's like, oh, this one has 3/4 of a pound of usable material in it that's not binders and things like that the fish can eat. This one over here that has 2 pounds also has 3/4 of nutrients the fish can actually use. And so I've got a 1/4 pound over here that's just like, oh, it's filler, fish can't really use it, extra waste in the aquarium. Over here, I have 1 1/4 pounds of waste and filler. So even though I think I'm feeding my fish a ton, they're having to eat a ton of gunk to get their nutrition, and their body has to work harder to digest that and things like that. So I'd much rather have nutrient-rich packed foods. And that's why I do say, and why people have experienced that, things like brine shrimp are magical, live black worms, all those things are very good. The closer you can get to live or frozen, the better. And that's the reason why is there's no fillers in those, and so the fish can fill its tiny stomach with 100% baby brine shrimp instead of 75% fish meal and vitamins and spirulina and things like that that it can use, and then cornmeal, wheat germ, soybean meal, all those kinds of things. Those are the fillers, but those still fill its stomach, so it can only get so many nutrients out of it. And then there's things that I'm not going to claim to be an expert on, but there's lots of studies that say that fish can't even utilize more than 12 or 13% of the food being spirulina, and some foods will be very high in spirulina. And so there's things like that. And so I maintain well-rounded diet, closer to live and raw ingredients you can get, the better. And that's why, like on my website, I sell lots of freeze-dried bloodworms and krill and brine shrimp and things like that, because there's not the fillers, and it's easy to stand behind a product that's just, it's 100% freeze-dried brine shrimp. It's either you do or don't like that in the way it feeds out and things like that. Where I do have, pellet food on there, and I like it quite a bit. My customers in the store like it quite a bit, and so now I do offer it on there, and it's a red-green pellet mix. It works really well for Africans. That's what I grow my Africans out there. Angels, anything that can take a mini pellet that actually does float and doesn't foul the water. I tend to feed very hard, and I want my fish to feed for a long time. Now, when it comes to feeding, a lot of people don't know that in the commercial sector, like I'll use Charles Clapsaddle as an example, just because I've seen his lectures to ALA and I can speak specifically to what he has said, but he grows lots and lots of live bears and African cichlids in 55-gallon barrel drums on a big central system in greenhouses. And he intentionally feeds the biggest pellet he can get, and he just puts it in there and lets them feed on it all day long, or at least until he comes around to do the next feeding on the day. And that's because we know that fish growth happens best when they're never limited by food. And so if we can keep them feeding and eating all the time, then all we have to do is keep the water clean. So if a fish eats all day long, just like if I eat all day long, I'm just going to get fatter and fatter and fatter. There's no doubt about that. So as long as we can clean up after me, it would be, I would put on weight, and the fish will do the same thing as long as we can clean up after them. And so you need a food, well, you don't need it, but if you're going to do his style and the style I do, you need a food that doesn't fall apart in the water. So things like a brine shrimp pellet, where after 2 minutes in the water they're just cloud of dust, that is not optimal for the type of feeding we're trying to do. So you want a pellet, if you're going to feed a pellet, that is going to be water stable for hours. Ideally, if you can feed every hour, then you don't need that. But if you can only feed twice a day, you want something where you can overfeed, let them feed on it, and then come back in after work and feed them again. And while we're talking about food real quick for, the purposes of breeding and things like that, know that something like flake food most of the vitamins that are sprayed onto that food leach into the water within 15 seconds. So when you feed flake food, if it's not eaten very quickly, most of those vitamins aren't going to get into the fish. Like, they'll still get the protein and stuff, but and that's why in general pellets tend to be more represented in the market, and people like pellets. Is the same thing happens to a pellet. You put it in the water, the outside coating of it within 15 seconds has leached into the water, but that whole core of it still packed with the nutrients and vitamins we've packed in there, and the fish can eat that and they will still get it. So that's typically why pellets are preferred over flake food. And in the case of, like Charles Clapsaddle, you're thinking, well, giant pellets, we're not going to feed that to baby fish. No, we exactly do. So you feed this big pellet, and you've got, let's say I've got 300 tetras in the tank, and they're constantly picking at it. They're getting all those bite-sized pieces and kind of peeling the layers off the onion, so to speak. So each layer has new vitamins for them to eat. So instead of feeding 100 small tiny pellets that all lose some of their vitamins if they're not eaten really quickly, you've got this one, few big pellets that have a much smaller surface area that are losing much less nutrients, And then if you were to have overfed, like let's say you come back and you're like, wow, there's a lot of food left, like I really overdid it. It's super easy to net 3 or 4 pellets that are big out than it is to go and get a bunch of micro pellet or something like that out of there, which requires a gravel vac and things. So yeah, so that's the food and kind of some of the tips. So the other one that was asked of me is, so I've been talking a lot about selling fish, but like in the first episode I talked about selling some plants. People want to know more about selling plants. Now, in my opinion, selling plants is kind of a completely different animal than selling fish. The reason being, most pet stores are really bad at growing plants. And a lot of you might say, like, yeah, my fish store has a horrible selection. They're always dying. They're not doing very well. And that's what makes it hard to sell to a local store if they're killing them. They don't see the value in plants. And so, like, first let me talk about the store side of it. Obviously, I do lots of plants. We grow them really well. We're an oddball in that scene. But I still order from vendors just like any other store would. And so when you're looking at farm lists and things like that, they typically want to get people in with packages. So they go, well, how about you give us $300 and we'll send you all these plants. And they make the choices. And it saves a little bit of money. The problem is when they're making the choices, that's not the best choice for either their type of water or maybe their type of clientele. And typically they're trying to impress the store by sending them a lot of plants. So they get lots of stem plants with lead bunches that the store either A, doesn't have time to unbunch and plant correctly, B, doesn't know you're supposed to unbunch those and plant them correctly, or C, they're just gonna kill it. And so they get all this stuff, they get this giant box, and go, wow, that bought a lot of stuff. If I sell this stuff, I'm gonna be rich. Except they don't sell any of it because they kill it all. And so for a store, the barrier of entry is much, much higher for plants than it is a fish. So let's use an example. Let's say we're talking about, a tank of cardinal tetras. What do you need to keep those cardinal tetras alive? You're going to need an aquarium. Let's say it's a 20-gallon tank. You need a sponge filter or any type of filter, but let's say they're using a sponge filter, and you need a light just bright enough so a customer could see what's in there to buy it. All right? And that's like the bare minimum to keep those things alive. Now, let's say you needed to keep a basic stem plant alive, like Bacopa. Bacopa caroliniana, super easy to grow. Why not? They're going to need that 20-gallon tank. They're going to need a better light than just a crappy T8 bulb that's been in that fish store for the last 40 years. They're going to need to put fertilizer in there. They're going to need someone that knows to identify a deficiency. They'll need to know enough to be able to plant it correctly, like either trim off some leaves and get it to root. So there's a bigger cost of entry. So the light itself, they might go, and that's the problem, is most stores won't get the lighting. So like on my tanks, my sales tanks, I use 2 Phoenix lights per 40 breeder. And so I'm looking at, a couple $100 per tank just to sell plants out of. And whereas like a cardinal tetra tank, let's say I didn't need to buy lighting at all and I just used the crappy lighting I had, I don't have to invest any really to make money out of there. Then there's things that the stores just aren't going to know. Like they're not going to know that bristlenose plecos devour any type of sword plant, and then they're going to lose battles to algae. They're not going to know how to win the war. And it's one thing when it happens to you in your aquarium, you're going, oh, what do I do? I've got algae. Oh no. It's another thing when you spend $300 on plants and everything's coated in algae and no one will buy it, and everyone thinks your store looks bad, and you can't get your money back out of it. That's a horrible feeling to know, oh, I should really either just throw these away and start over. And you're thinking, oh, if I start over, I gotta buy more plants. I really should get better lighting this time. I gotta figure out the algae problem. So there's lots of problems there. So let's assume that your store is bad at plants. You, if you want to sell to a store, basically have to idiot-proof it. And that means that you might start by making them Java moss. You get some Anubias and you make that for them, and you teach them that you don't put it in the gravel and don't let them kill the rhizome. You might even pot it up for them and just say, just leave it in these pots. Just don't even touch it. And then you want to like if I was going to sell to another store, as my own store. So let's say I'm bringing in plants I'm selling to other stores. I would set it up so that here's these plants. I suggest you buy this light, and I suggest you use our Easy Green fertilizer because we've already done the testing that with this light and Easy Green fertilizer once a week, you will get this result. And you basically need to make that for the store if you're going to sell to a store. And so you almost want a sheet that says, buy this, do this once a week, do this once a week, profit. You have to spell it out for him because you might be selling to the owner, but he might pass that off to one of the employees that says, make this work. I don't have time, make it work. And then even though you told the owner didn't realize, oh, that without that light it's not going to work, or oh, without fertilizer it's not going to work, or oh, I forgot to tell him not to bury the rhizome, whatever it is. So make it a sheet of paper that they can pass along. Also goes back to that professionalism thing. Even if you have a little care sheet, it does help. So that being said, there is a market for plants online, and it's way easier to ship online plants than it is fish. And so that's why there's a lot of Facebook groups, there's a lot of websites, there's a million websites doing it all. But most of those things have a few things in common. And that is either A, they're buying plants and reselling them out of the box, so to speak. So they buy $300 worth of plants, they land on Monday, they sort, pack, and ship them back out on Tuesday. And so the average customer is getting a plant that was grown immersed, was shipped to them, or shipped to the company. Let's say that took 2 days. Then they're kept out of an aquarium still, put into another box, shipped for another 2 days, then they arrive at the home, and then the customer puts them in the tank. They're kind of wilted, they're not very strong at that point. They're trying to convert from immersed to submerged grown. That's your competition. The bar is pretty low. Then the next echelon would be people that are growing the plants themselves, which that's great. So they're at least submerged grown. But then most times, like with stem plants and things like that, you're not getting rooted specimens. So you're going, okay, well here's some, Altananthera vernecii. It's nice and purple or red. It looks amazing. Oh, you'd like to buy some? An order came in through my little website. I grab it, I go snip, and then I roll it up in some paper towel when it's wet, and I put it in a plastic bag, and I ship it off to them. And the person that gets it then might struggle because they might not have as much light, they don't have the fertilizer dialed down, and they got to root it out. So the end client, you always want them to be successful, whether it's a fish store, the customer, and so I feel like we're leaving a lot to chance there that they're going to be able to root that out and be successful. And a lot of people say well, a lot of people can do that, right, but if you're really making money, you're going to be selling so many of these plants, and you'll be getting new people into plants that they will fail. They will horribly screw that up. And so you want to make it foolproof for your customer as well as the store or anything like that. So I would have the same thing. I would only, if I was selling plants online, which we will be selling plants online fairly soon, you would only want to sell things that are rooted. Make it so they have a chance. Give them a recommendation on what fertilizer to use. If you're using Seachem fertilizers and you dose Seachem, Flourish once a week, Trace once a week, and Potassium once a week, let them know you do that so that they can also be doing that. Also, let them know how to plant it. Just because they ordered hard to get expensive plants doesn't mean they know what they're doing, and so they might take that Anubias Nana Petite and go, oh, it looks like a 4-ground plant. Let me just jam that thing down in the substrate and see how that goes and watch all the leaves rot off. So you definitely want to have the care there. You want to make sure they're successful, and that's the hardest part. Every business is that. If the person you sell something to is successful, they will sing your praises to other people and more people will buy from you. If they fail, they will tell their failures to other people, and as an extension, they will think that your business was bad. Most people don't think, I'm really bad at doing this, let me go tell other people. Instead, they go, they sold me the worst plants, or they sold me faulty fish, and that's why I failed, because a human never likes to admit they're at fault. So they like to blame something, and if that's your business, that's going to be you, and you're going to get bad reviews and things like that. And so no matter how good you are, someone is going to order that plant, let it sit on a doorstep for 6 days, and then it'll be brown mush, and then that's your fault somehow. But as far as selling plants goes, I think you can make money buying plants, acclimating them to water, getting them submerged grown, then shipping them out. I think that works. That's kind of what like Dustin's fish tank does. He orders plants and grows plants, gets them submerged grown, then reships them out. It's working well for him. I think you can just grow your own plants. That being said, I recommend actually rooting them and not just clipping off the tops and shipping them. So yeah, focus on the customer experience. And then I'll talk about when I was shipping plants, and a few people I know that do ship plants. We're all flabbergasted at what sells. So you would think, all these rare plants, I'm going to list all these beautiful Philandras I have, I'm going to list Altanenthera renekii mini, I'm going to list UG, all these plants, like, oh, you can't find these anywhere. Like, oh, it's so hard to get them. And you're going to list all those, and then you're going to list water lettuce, frogbit, duckweed, Java moss, Java fern, Anubias, and you're going to start watching the sales, and you're like, okay, so this week I sold one beautiful Philandra and one Altanenthera renekii mini, I'm murdering that, saying it so many times. But then you're going to go, oh, and I sold 14 portions of water lettuce, I sold 3 frog bits, I sold 4 Java mosses, and 5 Anubias. Like, how is it that all those are way outselling these rare plants? It's just like the fish world. It's rare for a reason. And it's not because no one else can make it. Trust me, someone else out there can make it. It's just that the public doesn't demand it. And so, when people are new to the hobby are the biggest consumers by far. When you first got into fish, you bought tons of stuff. Now that you've been into it for a long time, you still buy stuff, but not nearly at the rate you did. The first month you were into fish, you might have spent $1,000. And now, oh, maybe you spend $100 a month, maybe 1/10 of what you were. The same thing's going to be going on for plants. When you're new, I'm going to start a planter tank. What do? You buy a light, you buy some CO2, you buy some fertilizer, you buy all these plants, you kill them, you buy another set of plants, you kill them. What do? You start going, well, let me start that. That one did okay. Let me get some more of those Anubias. Okay, Java moss hasn't died yet. Ooh, it says here to correct my algae problem, if I get a bunch of floating plants, that'll solve that. So you buy a bunch of floating plants. You start following advice you get on the internet, which is articles and forums and things like that, and they're always going to recommend easy things. Java moss, Vallisneria, floating plants. Cryptocorns, Anubiases. So that's why all those sell. It's the same reason cherry shrimp are the #1 sold shrimp, just because they're recommended the most. It's the reason why Java moss sells so much, because everyone needs it, everyone can grow it. And the same thing, most times you won't see any big sellers making a lot of money on all the rare stuff. It's rare for a reason. People don't want to spend the money, they're afraid they're going to kill it, and they don't know about it to know they want it. That being said, like, that's why the farms don't really produce beautiful Philandras and some of these rare stem plants, because the demand's not there. And even dwarf baby tears, I have a hard time buying them all the time. We buy farms out because they don't produce that many, because they don't sell nearly as much. So they might produce 100 pots of dwarf baby tears a week, and we think that's a decent amount or whatever, but they might go, well, we literally sell 3,000 Anubias Nana a week. So that's why they, like, if they're going to divert energy, they're going to go, we'll just make more Anubias Nanas. We're running out of those too, and they're easier to grow, less problems for the customer, that type of thing. We'll just grow more of that. And that's why, like, something like dwarf baby tears isn't always sitting in a shop. Also, I'll sell 10 to 1 any other plant to a dwarf baby tears or anything else. And so this lesson will go for both fish and plants. The lower the common denominator, the more you're going to sell of it. So you don't want to rule people out. So, like, let's say an Amazon sword is kind of a weird example, but it gets very large, but the internet says it's very easy to grow. And so you get a medium sales rate on Amazon swords. That being because some people say, oh, it's going to get too big for my tank. Other people just go, oh, well, it's easy, I'll buy it. Or let's say you have a Anubias Nana Petite. Internet will tell you it's easy to grow, and it stays small. All of a sudden, you're not ruling anyone out. So if you have a 5-gallon tank, you don't have to say, well, Amazon sword's not a very good idea. And you can say, oh, but Anubias Nana Petite will be great. You have a 100-gallon tank. Anubias Nana Petite will be great. So will the Amazon sword. But the 5-gallon, the Amazon sword won't work. And the same thing for fish. If you're breeding, a cichlid that gets 5 inches, anyone who's got probably a 29-gallon or let's say 20-gallon or under is automatically ruled out. And so that's why some of the biggest sellers is something that can go into every aquarium. Java moss can hit every single aquarium pretty much. Same with Anubias. Same with water spray or water lettuce. Same with bristlenose plecostomus, snails, most tetra. So that's why they're sold in such mass quantities, is because the people that are selling them have to say no the least amount of times. And so for me personally, like, one of the things I'm going to undertake here, and you can watch it unfold in my fish room, is I really want to amp up snail production. And it seems hilarious because people are going, well, snails are horrible, people don't want those. No, they do. They want mystery snails, they want blue ram's horn snails, they want leopard ram's horn snails, they want poso rabbit snails. All these things they do want, and you can keep them in any size aquarium. So when people go, oh, I've got a 1-gallon bowl, what can I put in it? A snail. Oh, I've got a 20-gallon tank of all these tetras, and I want a pleco that's not going to get very big, and I need to eat algae, what could I get? Oh yeah, you can get a mystery snail, or a ram's horn snail, or some autocinclus, or something like that. So it's that lowest common denominator is very important when you're thinking about, should I breed this or make this plant or something like that? No, is it going to be in high enough demand? So, the easiest way to do it is start reading beginner articles. So type in things like, my first aquarium, easy low light aquarium plants, easy fish to breed, easy fish to keep. All those things are what people that are new to the hobby are typing into Google and YouTube and things like that. And then we've already established they're the big spenders. They've got the most money to go into a store, go online, somehow, and consume those products. So we've got the person with the most money, and they're going to want the most basic stuff. And so that's why things like discus and rare plants and things like that tend to not sell very well, because the people that want that have much less money typically. And there's always outliers of like, oh, I'm the discus king, I keep 50 tanks of discus, I'm rich, whatever. But in terms of, if we sample 100,000 people, most of those people are just wanting to keep a nice fish tank. They spent most of their money at the beginning, then they buy a few odds and ends here and there. And that's, if you're trying to turn a business or get a business, that's who you want. You want all that big money. And that's all PetSmart, Petco, and things like that do. Their model is get someone into the hobby that's never been in before, get $500 out of them, then don't care about them. That's why they don't care if the fish live. They don't care if the plants die, anything like that. They want you to buy the tank setup. They want you to buy equipment. They want you to buy Petco brand fish food with a 10,000% markup, all of that stuff, and then they'll move on. They'll go, yep, you're done, we've exploited you as much as we can. Next, oh, you've never had a fish tank, little girl. Oh, you need a fish tank, let me sell you some crap. And that's where the money is, the new person. And so now you know, you target the new person, you will sell a lot more. That being said, there are a few people that make a living off of some of the rarer stuff, but it's a tough road. And it's much easier, the more buyers you have, the easier life gets for you. You don't have to do as much marketing, and you don't have to be as smart. You can just go, oh, well, feeder goldfish, 1 billion of these are sold a year. If I make feeder goldfish, I can unload them anytime I want. Now all you gotta do is figure out how you make them cheap enough. You don't have to figure out how to sell them, you just gotta figure out how to make them cheap enough. And so that's gonna lead to one last thing for this episode. Realize you don't have to breed anything, whether it's a plant or a fish or anything like that, to make money off of it. You could simply buy from another breeder. You could buy from a fish farm, buy from a wholesaler, something like that. But there are lots of fish that when they get bigger, they're worth more. Something like a goldfish, like in the back here. You take small goldfish, go pick up nice goldfish that are small. Let's say you're spending $7 each, and you start growing them to massive goldfish. All of a sudden someone goes, wow, that one looks pretty good. Wow, I would love to own that. Yeah, I'd pay $100 for that. Boom, you're making money off fish and you didn't even breed a fish. The same thing happens with koi. If you've got a good eye to spot good fish, you can make a lot of money that way. That being said, you could also just go, well, let me go buy from one of my stores. Let's say I go, well, how much would you charge me for 300 neon tetras? I want them the cheapest I can get them, which that just means small. So let's say you get a neon tetra that's 1/2 an inch. Now you grow them up to 2 inches. Like these things are, let's say, 14 months old, but they are the best, nicest neon tetras you've ever seen. Then you could either A, say, all right, I would like to sell these tetras back to that same store or another store, and let's say you're getting, I'm just gonna throw a number out there and say $1 a piece because, man, these things are giant and awesome. And you only bought those neons, say you bought them for 40 cents. So you're making 60-cent spread. Yeah, you had to feed them, care for them, stuff like that. But there's lots of money. And then also realize that, well, maybe you're doing this through the summer outside. We'll talk about breeding fish and keeping fish outside. Let's say you buy a big pack of neon tetras and you put them in a 500-gallon pond outside and you let them eat bugs and you throw some food to them and they live out there for 4 months. They come back in, they're twice as colored up and look twice as good. You probably should be able to make some money off them somehow if you're choosing the right fish. Now, that being said, there are fish that go down in value. So things like Oscars, Jack Dempsey's, most of the Central and South American cichlids, the bigger they get, the harder they are to sell and the more space they take up. So definitely be choosy if you're going to go down that approach of, I don't breed fish, I just raise fish. That's a different animal. Alright, I'm going to hit one more thing, because I wanted to do a whole episode on this one, but it doesn't justify a whole episode, and I forgot about it till now, and that is, every fish and plant has the right size for it to sell. Now, for an Oscar, that's 2 inches. 2-inch Oscars, they're a gold mine. Everyone wants them, they're so cute and cuddly, and everyone's got space for them. At 6 inches, oh yeah, okay, there's still some clientele. And at 12 inches, you can't give that thing away. And so for guppies, it's going to be the bigger that guppy is. If you can get a female that's 3.5 inches long, that thing will sell without you even telling someone it's for sale. Like they can just walk by your tank, like, oh, look at, hey, is that for sale? That thing is amazing. Biggest one I've ever seen. So learning the right size is very important. Bigger is not always better. Smaller is not always better. There's a size that sells well, and for most time, usually that's wherever the fish looks its best. And I know that's subjective, but best coloration is very important. And so if you can get great color out of a smaller fish, you make more money. And that's why angelfish breeders love to breed a veil-tail angel. That fish looks bigger, even though it's younger, because those fins make that fish look bigger, they can sell that fish at a smaller age. You know, it might only be 2 months old instead of 3 months old, or they get it to 3 months old and it's the same size as the fish that's 5 months old, and they get more money from the store, whatever it is. But there is an optimal size for every fish, and if you're not moving that fish at that size, realize you're losing money. So either A, you've grown it too long, and now you've put too much time, energy, and food into it, and you're not getting as much of the benefit, or you're moving it too early, and you're leaving some money on the table. So there's always this little window that you really want to be selling in. And the same goes for plants. We have to do this all the time in the store. I bring in a plant, it's 5 inches tall, and let's say I brought in 30 of them. And we'll just use Bacopa again for the example. And in that week, I sold 21 of them, so I got 9 left. But the problem is they're all this tall. Now, I bring in like 30 more Bacopa. I'm going to sell majority of the new Bacopas because they're smaller, and then I'll sell, let's say, 4 more of the taller ones that week. So then week number 3 rolls around. Now I got Bacopa that's this long. It's like as tall as a 75-gallon tank. They just won't sell. And it's because they grew themselves out of the common denominator. So the plant that was this big could go in a 5-gallon, 10-gallon, 20-gallon, any size tank. The one that's this tall already, that's the most value, and even though the public could go snip, snip, I just made 3 times as many plants because the stem plant, they literally won't even buy it. I have to put it into a grab bag and discount it to get it out the door. And fish can be the exact same way. You have like, okay, this fish is $1, $1, $1. Ooh, I'm hitting my sweet spot. We sell it for $3, $3. Oh my God, $2, $1. And so you want to be selling in that zone, and that's your job to make sure you produce just enough that you're always selling in that zone. Because if you make 10,000, you can sell 1,000 in that zone, and the other 9,000 are in the other zone. That's where you're not making as much money zone. So you'd rather stay here. And as a fish gets bigger, or as a plant gets bigger, it eats more and more and more food, which cuts in your profits more and more and more. And that's, you know, if you're doing it for business, that's the goal. You want maximum profit, minimal work, minimal investment, and there's a sweet spot for that. And you want to be capitalizing on that. Some things you can capitalize on, for instance, like a pygmy Corydora. Everyone assumes they're going to be very small. You can sell that fish at a very small size because everyone's buying it because they want it small. You know, so that one, you know, sells itself. But know that like a stir-by Corydora, it's almost like at full-grown size, you know, at 3.5 inches, they go, oof, those things are pretty big for my 20-gallon tank. I don't think I can do that. But at the normal size of 1.5 inches to 1 3/4 inches, no one ever thinks twice about putting them in their aquarium. It's either A, they want them, or B, they don't. It's never, oh, is it too big, is it too small? It is or it isn't. You know, it's like, ooh, I do want or I don't want. And so that's that perfect size for plants and things like that as well. And that's part of you and your wheelhouse, planning how many am I going to sell, how many should I make. You know, you're way better off if you're potting plants and making cuttings and things like that to cut 2 plants and plant them every single day than you are to go, well, let me go plant 40 and then 3 weeks from now plant 40, because you won't have any variance in size and things like that. And the same goes for fish. You're probably better off, you know, let's say you've got a spawn of 700 angels, you're probably better off raising 100 of that 700 and letting 600 get eaten. And then next week or 2 weeks later, raise another 100, and you'll have varying sizes to keep putting out into stores at the right time, versus I've got 700, I don't pull any more eggs, and they get to the sellable size. A week later, they're a little bit too big. A week later, they're a little bit too big. A week later, they're way too big. And so now you're either A, giving it to the store at the same price, or B, you're raising the price and they're raising their price, which they're selling less of. So now they're going, oh, we're not selling this as much, we need to buy less from you. And so you really only want to supply the same product every time. So that's all I've got for this Q&A. Please do ask more questions about this. It makes it easier for me just to, you know, one, I'll reply. I reply to almost everything, and I'll give you an answer. But then I'll use that topic as something to talk about in the video as well. And so yeah, definitely leave comments down below. In the description is where I put, any links to anything that's pertinent, and we put, links to other videos and stuff here in the screen. And then last but not least, I do want to mention we've started something called Team Aquarium Co-op, and it's at our website, aquariumcoop.com. It's a newsletter that you can sign up for, and what it does is, on your side, you will share information with those that need it. So when you see a new hobbyist and they don't know how pH works, link our pH video. Or you meet a new breeder and he's never seen this video series, go, hey buddy, watch this. This might help you out. And then what we'll do is when we get products that we do reviews on, and our vendors just send us swag and things like that, where we get too much of stuff, what we're going to do is each week, or I shouldn't say each week because I don't know how many products we'll get all the time, but when we do get products, we're going to pull a random email address out of there and just shoot you an email and go, hey, you won, like this week it might be like, hey, this Whisper air pump that I don't need, that I bought to use for a review video. I just go, hey, what's your normal address? I'll throw a label on this and ship it out to you just for being a part. And long term, we will get things where, and we've done this in the past, where it's like, well, what if we give you 100 of these? And we're like, well, we'll hand out 100 samples to our friends and family and customers and things like that. So if you want to join Team Aquarium Co-op and get funny things in the newsletter, like outtakes and stuff like that, we plan on doing some stuff like that. And in general, just keep you, in tune with us and help build the community as a whole. And that's what I'm trying to do here, is I want to build a community that's here to help people. And I know every community says that, but I figure in this way, where I make hopefully an educational video, you help get it into the right hands. It can only go well, I think. And yeah, there's always going to be people that say that, oh, Corey doesn't know what he's talking about, I do it differently. Sure, there's always going to be people that know more than everyone else. But my goal is just to help people that know less than I do about a particular subject. And then in turn, I hope they teach me something that I don't know about that subject. I learn a lot from your guys' comments. I do watch your videos. I do research into you ask, well, what about this? And I don't know about it. I go and research it, then I give my input on what I think, and I will always say I don't know. Like someone was asking me about breeding saltwater fish for profit, and I gave them my thoughts on it, but I do leave the caveat of I'm not a professional saltwater fish breeder. But like his question was, do you think there's money to be made? And my answer was, I think there's even more money to be made, because the saltwater community realizes that a captive bred fish or coral is a good thing, and we're not pillaging the wild. And so most times they're willing to pay more for a captive raised fish than they are wild. And so that was my opinion, though. That being said, I haven't bred I haven't ever bred a saltwater fish. I've made some anemones and stuff like that, but I haven't bred a saltwater fish ever, unless you count like saltwater mollies and stuff. But because it's not my profession, I don't want to give advice like it is. I will give advice of like, well, I have dabbled in markets and here's what I think. So anyway, that's a long outro there. I do appreciate you guys watching. Go ahead and like and subscribe and leave comments. All those things help the channel. They help me with content. They help you with getting you answers. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and I look forward to shooting some more. That won't happen until I'm back from Japan, but we'll see you in the next one, and thanks for watching.